So we've set up an RStudio project and we've created a dimension.md markdown file, which is a text file with a .md extension. And now we're ready to start putting some content into that file and rendering it into a document using RStudio. Markdown is a formatting language, which means there are special characters that say something about the way that the text around those characters is formatted in the document that we render. If you don't put any of those special characters in, then the RStudio tool is going to consider whatever you're typing in as just plain text in a paragraph. So if I type something like "this is a sentence in a paragraph," hit carriage return, then this is going to be plain text in our rendered document. Now, a quick way to go ahead and render the document and see what it looks like is with this preview button. And there's a little arrow next to the preview button. If I click on that, it'll give me different options for how I want to render it. I could render it to an HTML file. I could render it to an Adobe PostScript data file, or I could render it to a Microsoft Word docx file. Now for now, I'm just going to pick HTML. So it's going to translate the formatting language in Markdown into the HTML language and generate an HTML document that I can bring up in a browser. So if I click that button, then RStudio is going to work on it, and it's going to pop up an RStudio browser that looks at that dimension.html file it just created, in which case it's got really simple text in it. It just says this is a sentence in a paragraph, just like the text we typed in the file. So this is our rendered document. Let's see what happened in the background when we did that. So you can see that it actually created a new file in our working directory. So when you use this preview button, it's going to render the Markdown document into a formatted document in the same directory where the Markdown file is. So here is our dimension.html file. You also might have noticed that a render tab has popped up in our console panel in RStudio. And if we look at this render tab, this is showing the system command that RStudio executed in order to create that formatted document. And the tool it uses to do that is called pandoc. So you can see this is the system call. It called the program pandoc. And in order for pandoc to do what it needed to do, RStudio had to give it all of these different command line options. And I'm not going to go through these in detail, in order to get pandoc to render the markdown that we created into an HTML file. Now you might also that there's a warning here that says that this document format requires a non-empty title element. And we'll talk later about how to get rid of that warning. But that's just the basics of how you render a markdown file in plain text into a formatted HTML file. And as one more example here, this is just an HTML file that any web browser should be able to handle. So if I click on the file here and I tell it I want to view in my system web browser, I can also bring up that HTML in the web browser I typically use, which in this case is Chrome. And you can see here's that text. This is a sentence in a paragraph in that rendered HTML. So those are the basics of rendering.